In the vast expanse of the Milky Way, peace had reigned for millennia. Not the uneasy peace of deterrence or the fragile peace of exhaustion, but the natural peace that came from the very biology of its sapient species. Every spacefaring race discovered thus far shared a common trait. They were herbivores. From the towering Veldari with their crystalline-based photosynthetic supplements to the diminutive Zaxexi, who processed stellar radiation through their translucent skin, all advanced species had evolved without the need to consume other sentient beings. The galactic Concordat's primary xenobiological research station orbited the gas giant Helios VI, its sweeping arrays constantly scanning for new civilizations ready to join the interstellar community. Chief researcher Ixel stood before the facility's central observation window, her long neck swaying gently as she processed the latest data streams. The Concordat had documented over 300 sapient species in its 10,000 years of existence, and not once had they encountered what their ancient theories called predators. Chief researcher called out her assistant Nera, their bioluminescent patches pulsing with excitement. "We've detected something unusual from Sector 47 Beta." Ixel's inner eyelids flickered with interest. Sector 47 Beta had been largely ignored due to its position near the galaxy's outer spiral arm. "Show me." The holoscreen materialized before them, displaying a series of electromagnetic signatures that made Ixel's specialized sensory organs quiver. "These are artificial signals," she declared, her voice carrying the harmonics of scientific curiosity. "But the pattern, it's unlike anything in our archives." The signals were aggressive, powerful, broadcast with an intensity that seemed almost wasteful. Most species developed communication methods that mimicked natural phenomena: photosynthetic pulses, chemical gradients, or gentle gravitational waves. These signals punched through space like they were trying to tear holes in reality itself. "There's more," Nara continued, their feeding tendrils writhing with nervous energy. "We've detected artificial satellites around the third planet of the system, and," they hesitated, "evidence of large-scale environmental modification." Environmental modification wasn't unusual. Many species shaped their worlds to better suit their needs. But as the data continued streaming in, Ixel felt her primary stomach clench. The modifications weren't the gentle terraforming she was familiar with. These were violent changes, massive excavations, artificial canyons, vast areas of deliberately destroyed and reconstructed ecosystems. "Prepare a first contact assessment team," Ixel ordered, her scientific training warring with an instinct she didn't know she possessed. "Full quarantine protocols. And," she added, "double the standard security complement." The assessment team arrived in the system 3 local months later, their ship designed to be as non-threatening as possible, all smooth curves and biological aesthetics. They settled into a high orbit around the blue-green world the natives called Earth, and began their standard observations. What they found shattered every assumption the Concordat had held about sapient life. "This can't be correct," muttered senior observer Kex as he reviewed the preliminary scans. "Run it again." The results came back the same. The dominant species, these humans, were not just omnivores. They were descended from dedicated pursuit predators. Their entire evolutionary history was written in their biology. Forward-facing eyes for depth perception, endurance-optimized bodies, complex problem-solving skills developed for tracking and hunting. But that wasn't what truly terrified the assessment team. It was the way these humans had turned their predatory nature into a technological advantage. Their cities were marvels of efficiency and power projection. Their vehicles were designed for speed and maneuverability that would have seemed excessive to any herbivorous species. Their information networks pulsed with data about conflicts, strategies, and martial prowess. "They're warriors," Kex whispered, his feeding tendrils completely still for the first time in his adult life. "Their entire civilization is built around the concepts of competition and conquest." Yet as the team continued their observation, a more complex picture emerged. These predators had developed art, music, and literature. They cared for their young with a fierce devotion that matched any herbivorous species. They had laws protecting the weak, institutions dedicated to healing, and a driving curiosity about the universe that rivaled the Concordat's own. Most surprisingly, they had developed something the assessment team had never seen before. They called it empathy, the ability to understand and share the feelings of others, even potential prey species. They kept other animals as companions, not food sources. They created vast preservation areas to protect other species on their world. The team's report back to the Concordat caused an immediate crisis. Some called for quarantine of the entire sector. Others, particularly the younger scientists, argued for immediate contact. The debate raged across subspace channels for weeks until Ixel made an observation that silenced everyone. "Look at their trajectory," she said, displaying a graph of human technological development. "They're advancing exponentially. We're not asking whether to contact them. We're asking whether to meet them as equals now or as potential superiors later." The graph told a stark truth. In mere centuries, humans had progressed from primitive tool use to space exploration. Their predatory innovation, driven by competition and necessity, had created a technological growth rate that outstripped anything the Concordat had seen before. "We need to understand them," Ixel concluded, "because they will find us, whether we wish it or not. And when they do, we need to know if their predatory nature will make them our greatest threat or our greatest protectors." As if to emphasize her point, a new signal appeared on their monitors. A human probe, crude by Concordat standards, but remarkably effective, had just detected their observation ship's presence, and the human's response was characteristically direct. A simple message, broadcast on all frequencies. "Unknown vessel, this is Earth Control. We see you. We come in peace. Do you copy?" Ixel felt her feeding tendrils curl with a mixture of fear and excitement. The age of peaceful herbivores was about to end. The era of humanity had begun. The first official meeting between humanity and the galactic Concordat took place in neutral space, halfway between Earth's orbit and the Concordat's nearest outpost. The human vessel, the UES Endeavour, was everything the Concordat's preliminary assessment had feared: sleek, powerful, and unmistakably designed with military capabilities in mind. Yet it was also beautiful, its hull adorned with symbols of peace and scientific curiosity from 100 Earth cultures. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood at the Endeavour's observation deck, watching the Concordat's ship approach. Unlike the human vessel's utilitarian design, the alien ship looked like a living thing, its organic curves reminiscent of a massive seed drifting through space. "They're herbivores," she muttered, reviewing the briefing documents one last time. "Every single one of them. Which makes us the scariest thing they've ever encountered," Captain Miguel Rodriguez replied, standing beside her. His hand unconsciously rested on his ceremonial sword, a gesture that would have seemed perfectly normal to humans, but would soon cause quite a stir among their visitors. The Concordat delegation was led by High Administrator Venn, a Veldari whose crystalline-based biology made them shimmer in the ship's lighting. Accompanying them was Chief Researcher Ixel, whose preliminary studies had convinced the Concordat to attempt peaceful contact rather than quarantine. The meeting chamber had been specially designed to accommodate both species, with atmospheric controls that could create separate environments within the same space. As the human delegation entered from one side and the Concordat representatives from the other, both groups experienced their first moment of true cultural shock. The Concordat delegation's feeding tendrils writhed in collective anxiety as they observed the humans' confident strides, their forward-facing eyes, and their obvious musculature. Millions of years of evolutionary instinct screamed predator at them. Meanwhile, the humans found themselves face to face with beings that defied their basic understanding of intelligent life, creatures that seemed more like plants or crystal formations than animals. On behalf of humanity, Ambassador Chen began, her voice steady despite the historic gravity of the moment. "We extend greetings of peace and friendship to the Galactic Concordat. The translation systems worked perfectly, but the cultural gap proved more challenging. When Captain Rodriguez stepped forward and offered the traditional military salute, several Concordat members visibly recoiled at what they perceived as a display of aggression. The ceremonial sword at his side, meant to represent humanity's dignity and honor, caused even more distress. "We acknowledge your greeting," High Administrator Venn responded carefully, "though we must address certain concerns immediately. Your species' biological nature presents unique challenges to galactic peace." What followed was one of the most delicate diplomatic dances in human history. The humans had to explain concepts that had never occurred to the Concordat species: the difference between being capable of violence and being driven by it, the evolution of predatory instincts into protective ones, the development of cultural and ethical constraints on natural impulses. "Yes, we evolved as predators," Ambassador Chen acknowledged, addressing the underlying fear directly. "But we've also evolved beyond being ruled by those instincts. We've developed philosophies of peace, systems of law, and ethical frameworks that guide our actions. Yet you maintain military forces," Ixel observed, their scientific curiosity temporarily overriding their caution. "Your very vessel is equipped for combat." "We maintain defensive capabilities," Captain Rodriguez corrected, choosing his words carefully. "Our history has taught us that peace must sometimes be protected. The same instincts that once made us hunters now make us guardians." The conversation took an unexpected turn when the humans shared their entertainment media, particularly their stories about first contact scenarios. The Concordat delegation was fascinated to discover that humans had long imagined meeting alien life, and in many of these stories, humans cast themselves as protectors or peacekeepers. "You've imagined yourselves as guardians of other species?" Venn asked, their crystalline structure refracting light in patterns that indicated deep thought. "Even before knowing we existed. It's part of our evolution," Ambassador Chen explained. "Predators don't just hunt. They protect their territories, their families, their communities. We've expanded that protective instinct to encompass all of humanity, and we're prepared to extend it further." As the meeting progressed, the initial tension began to ease. The Concordat representatives were particularly impressed by human medical science, another field where predatory precision had been turned to benevolent purposes. The concept of surgery, completely foreign to species that relied on natural healing and regeneration, both horrified and fascinated them. But the true breakthrough came when the humans shared their conservation efforts, how a predator species had learned to protect and preserve other forms of life. The Concordat began to understand that humanity's predatory nature was inextricably linked with a deep sense of responsibility. "Perhaps," Ixel suggested near the meeting's end, "we have been too quick to judge based on evolutionary history alone. The real measure of the species should be what they choose to become, not what they once were." As the first day of negotiations drew to a close, both delegations had achieved something remarkable: the beginning of understanding. But as they retired to their respective ships, news arrived that would soon test this fragile new relationship. Multiple Concordat worlds had gone silent, their subspace communications completely dark. Ambassador Chen didn't know it yet, but humanity's protective instincts would soon be needed more desperately than anyone could have imagined. The emergency session of the Concordat Council brought together representatives from 50 spacefaring species, their distinct biological forms filling the massive chamber with a riot of colors and shapes. At the center of the chamber, a holographic display showed the spreading darkness. 17 worlds had now gone silent, their communications networks destroyed by an unknown force. Ambassador Chen sat in humanity's newly assigned observation seat, her expression grim as she studied the tactical display. Captain Rodriguez stood behind her, his military training allowing him to spot patterns that the peace-oriented Concordat species had missed. "The attacks aren't random," he whispered to Chen. "They're methodical, testing defenses and responses. Whatever this is, it's intelligent and strategic." High Administrator Venn's voice carried across the chamber, their crystalline form pulsing with distress patterns. The last transmission from Xerxes Prime showed unknown vessels of organic composition. They ignored all attempts at communication and, their voice faltered, began systematic destruction of all technological infrastructure. "What about defensive measures?" Chen asked, drawing startled looks from nearby representatives. The concept of defense was still uncomfortable for many concordat species. "We have preservation shields," Ixel explained, their feeding tendrils writhing in agitation. "But they're designed to protect against natural phenomena, solar flares, asteroid impacts. We've never needed to defend against deliberate aggression." The human delegates exchanged knowing looks. Their worst fears were confirmed. The concordat's peaceful evolution had left them completely unprepared for conflict. The very concept of strategic defense was alien to them. "We've managed to retrieve some sensor data from the attacked worlds," a Zaxexi representative announced, their translucent skin clouding with anxiety. The holographic display shifted, showing grainy images of the attackers. The chamber fell silent. The attacking vessels were unlike anything the Concordat had seen. Massive, organic ships that seemed to be living creatures themselves. They moved with predatory grace, targeting communication centers and power distribution nodes with terrifying precision. "Those are hunter-killer patterns," Rodriguez declared, his voice cutting through the silence. "They're not just destroying infrastructure. They're systematically isolating their prey before moving in for the kill." The word prey sent ripples of fear through the chamber. But Chen had spotted something in her colleague's posture. The shift from diplomatic observer to protective warrior. It was a change that the Concordat species couldn't understand, but one that might represent their only hope. "The Concordat faces an unprecedented crisis," Chen addressed the chamber, standing to command attention. "You need help from those who understand predatory behavior. You need defenders who know how to think like hunters in order to stop them." "You're suggesting human intervention?" Ven asked, their crystalline structure refracting light in patterns of both hope and apprehension. "We're offering partnership," Chen corrected. "Humanity's military expertise combined with Concordat technology. Your preservation shields linked to our tactical systems. Your biological understanding merged with our strategic experience." Captain Rodriguez stepped forward, activating his own tactical display. "These attackers are following classic predator strategies. Strategies we understand because they're part of our evolutionary history, but we've evolved beyond them. We've learned to use our predatory instincts for protection rather than destruction." The display shifted, showing human military formations and defense strategies. "We can help you establish early warning systems, defensive perimeters, and response protocols. We can train your people in defensive operations while respecting your peaceful nature." A Velderi elder, their crystalline form ancient and wise, spoke up. "But would accepting such help not change us, make us more like predators ourselves?" "No," Chen replied firmly. "It would make you survivors. There's a difference between learning to defend yourself and becoming an aggressor. Humanity learned this lesson long ago. Strength used in defense of others is not the same as strength used for dominance." The debate raged for hours, but reality forced the Concordat's hand. 3 more worlds went dark during the council session alone. Finally, High Administrator Ven made an unprecedented declaration. "The Concordat formally requests Earth's assistance in this crisis." What followed was a flurry of activity that shocked the Concordat species with its speed and precision. Human military advisors were dispatched to key worlds. The UEA's Endeavor, joined by 3 other human vessels, began establishing defensive patterns around vulnerable systems. Earth's shipyards received Concordat technical specifications and began adapting human defensive technologies to protect herbivorous crews. But as the first joint human Concordat defensive fleet assembled, a new transmission arrived from the invasion force's predicted path. The message was simple and terrifying. "All worlds will feed the swarm." Humanity's first real test as galactic protectors was about to begin, and the stakes couldn't have been higher. The nature of civilization itself hung in the balance. Would the galaxy's peaceful species survive, or would the aggressive forces of predation consume all they had built? The UES Endeavour hung in space above Proxima Colony, its hull gleaming under the light of unfamiliar stars. The bridge hummed with activity as Captain Rodriguez studied tactical displays showing the approaching swarm. Beside him, Chief Researcher Ixel watched in fascination as the humans prepared for battle with a precision that seemed almost beautiful in its efficiency. "Your people move like a single organism," Ixel observed, their feeding tendrils swaying with scientific curiosity. "Yet each performs unique tasks. It's called coordination," Rodriguez explained, his eyes never leaving the tactical display. "Like your body's different systems working together. We've just applied it to group behavior." The defensive line they'd established was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before, a fusion of human military doctrine and Concordat biotechnology. Modified preservation shields pulsed with new strength, while organic sensor arrays extended the fleet's awareness far into space. But their greatest advantage was something the swarm couldn't have anticipated: human understanding of predatory behavior. "They're hunting blind," Lieutenant Sarah Martinez announced from her tactical station. "No concept of counter-predator tactics. They've never faced opposition that understood their patterns." The first engagement proved her right. When the swarm attacked Proxima Colony, they encountered not panicked herbivores, but a coordinated defense guided by humanity's ancestral knowledge of pursuit and protection. Human ships moved in patterns that confused the swarm's hunting instincts, while Concordat vessels provided biological countermeasures that disrupted their organic sensors. "Remarkable," breathed Ixel as they watched the swarm's first wave break against the defensive line. "You're not just fighting them. You're communicating with them in the language of predation." "We're speaking a language they understand," Rodriguez confirmed, "but one we've evolved beyond. They hunt by instinct alone. We hunt by choice, and we choose to hunt only those who threaten the innocent." The battle for Proxima Colony became a template for the defense of the galaxy. Human tactical advisors, paired with Concordat biological experts, established similar defensive networks around key systems. But perhaps more importantly, they began teaching the herbivorous species something they never needed before: the art of protective action. On the garden world of New Eden, a Veldari defense coordinator named Lyra demonstrated how quickly they could learn. When a swarm splinter group threatened a civilian evacuation, Lyra used their crystalline biology to create a dazzling display that confused the attacker's sensory organs, a defensive technique inspired by Earth's peacock mantis shrimp. "You see," Ambassador Chen told the Concordat Council in an emergency session, "defense doesn't require you to become predators. It requires you to understand your own strengths and use them in new ways." The turning point came 3 months into the conflict. The swarm, frustrated by repeated failures against the new defensive networks, gathered for a massive push against the Concordat's core worlds. But humanity had anticipated this. It was exactly what Earth's ancient pack hunters would have done when denied easier prey. The combined fleet waited in carefully planned positions, using the lessons learned from Earth's own evolutionary history. Just as ancient humans had turned their prey's stampeding instincts against them, the defenders used the swarm's aggressive nature to lead them into a trap. "They're following the exact patterns of frustrated apex predators," Rodriguez explained to his mixed human Concordat bridge crew. "When denied food, they'll take greater risks, become more aggressive, more predictable." The trap was sprung in the Helios system. As the swarm charged forward, they found themselves caught between overlapping fields of defensive fire. Human ships darted through their formation like wolves among confused cattle, disrupting their cohesion. Concordat vessels unleashed biological countermeasures that turned the swarm's organic technology against itself. But the most remarkable moment came when a group of Zaksexi ships, traditionally the most peaceful of Concordat species, executed a perfect defensive maneuver that scattered a swarm attack wing. They hadn't become predators. They'd become protectors, using their natural abilities in ways they'd never imagined. "We understand now," High Administrator Venn declared as they watched the swarm retreat in disarray. "The difference between predation and protection isn't in the capabilities one possesses, but in how one chooses to use them." The victory at Helios marked the beginning of the end for the swarm invasion. Over the next few weeks, the combined fleet pushed them back from Concordat space, system by system. But humanity's greatest contribution wasn't their military might. It was teaching the galaxy's peaceful species that they could defend themselves without losing their essential nature. As the last swarm ships fled into uncharted space, Captain Rodriguez found Ixel in the Endeavor's observation lounge, watching the stars. "Your people have changed us," Ixel said softly, "but not in the way we feared. You've shown us that strength and peace aren't opposites, they're companions." "And you've changed us too," Rodriguez replied. "You've reminded us that our predatory past doesn't define our future. It's simply one of the tools we can use to protect what matters." 1 year after the Battle of Helios, the Galactic Concordat gathered for a historic session. The Great Chamber had been modified, with humanity's delegation now holding a permanent seat among the Council rather than the observer position they'd started with. The changes went far deeper than mere seating arrangements, though. They were written in the very way the species interacted. Ambassador Chen watched with quiet pride as representatives from across the galaxy demonstrated their newfound confidence. The Veldari, once trembling at any sign of conflict, now stood tall as they discussed their new planetary defense networks. The Zaxexi, who used to hide their translucent forms from any perceived threat, proudly displayed the bioluminescent patterns they'd developed for coordinating group actions. "We gather today," High Administrator Venn announced, their crystalline form glowing with purpose, "to mark not just the end of a crisis, but the beginning of a new era in galactic civilization." The chamber's holographic display showed the transformed galaxy. Defense platforms orbited key worlds, not as weapons of war, but as shields of peace. Joint human Concordat patrols maintained safe travel lanes between systems. But most importantly, the display showed something unprecedented. Training academies where humans taught defensive techniques to herbivorous species, while learning from them about biological harmony and sustainable development. "Humanity came to us as our greatest fear," Venn continued, "predators among peaceful beings. Yet they became our greatest teachers, showing us that the ability to defend does not require the desire to destroy." Captain Rodriguez, now Admiral Rodriguez, stood to address the chamber. His ceremonial sword, once a source of terror to the Concordat species, was now understood as what it truly was, a symbol of the responsibility that came with strength. "A year ago, I thought we were here to teach," he began. "But we've learned far more than we've taught. The Concordat has shown us that peace isn't passive. It's an active choice that must be renewed each day. You've helped us understand our own nature better." Chief Researcher Ixel, their feeding tendrils moving in patterns of scientific satisfaction, presented the results of their latest studies. The integration of human protective instincts with Concordat biological science has created something entirely new. We are developing defenses that protect without harming, strength that doesn't require violence. The changes were evident everywhere. Concordat ships now carried human-designed defensive systems, but they'd been modified to capture rather than destroy. Human military doctrine had been transformed by Concordat biological insights, leading to strategies that focused on deflection and deterrence rather than confrontation. Perhaps most remarkably, Ixel continued, "We've discovered that human predatory instincts, when properly channeled, create the strongest protective drives we've ever observed. They don't just defend their own. They defend any they consider under their protection." The chamber stirred with murmurs of agreement. Many remembered how human ships had taken hits meant for Concordat vessels, how human advisors had evacuated civilian populations before securing their own safety. The predator species had proved to be the most dedicated protectors. Ambassador Chen rose to make the formal proposal that would cement this new relationship. we proposed the establishment of the Galactic Defense Initiative, not as a military force, but as a cooperative effort to ensure the safety of all species. Humans will serve as guardians, while the Concordat species advance their defensive technologies and techniques. But this time, she added with a smile, we do it as equals, not as predators and prey, not as protectors and protected, but as partners in maintaining galactic peace. The vote was unanimous. As the chamber erupted in the various biological expressions of approval unique to each species, Admiral Rodriguez turned to Ixel. "Did you ever imagine," he asked, "when you first detected our aggressive signals, that it would lead to this?" "No," Ixel admitted, their feeding tendrils moving in what humans now recognized as amusement. "We thought the discovery of predators would end our civilization. Instead, it completed it." High Administrator Venn closed the session with words that would be recorded in the histories of 1,000 worlds. "Let it be known that on this day, we learned the final truth about predators, that their greatest instinct is not to hunt, but to protect. And in doing so, they taught us that true peace is not the absence of strength, but the wisdom to know how to use it." As the chamber emptied, the holographic display showed a new symbol, a human hand, and a Concordat feeding tendril intertwined, surrounded by stars. Below it, in every language of the galaxy, were written the words, "Peace through protection, strength through unity." The age of simple herbivorous harmony was over. The era of protected peace had begun.